right, so my guest today is a longtime friend and confidant, Dr. Ashley Benz. And our conversation today is going to be about the missing layer, the space between effort and efficiency, between intention and execution. We're going to talk about what science explains well, what it doesn't, yet capture cleanly, and how awareness, perception, and mechanics quietly shape performance in ways that most athletes never learn to see. So, Ashley, tell me, before the PhD, before all the research you've been doing and have done, what first pulled you towards exercise science? Was it curiosity about the body, frustration with training, or something you experienced personally as an athlete?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, it's multifaceted. I grew up an athlete. I played many different sports and finally landed on gymnastics. And there are some complexities that come with that sport. Um, Being an injury-prone athlete and never fully quite understanding the fueling aspect behind it, I went into college wanting to understand. I wanted to better understand how the body responds, better understand why the body responds the way it does, and then how do we work with the body to optimize performance without driving it into the ground. So that's really how I got started, just being an athlete myself and then a forever athlete continuing on after college.
So now you've been doing Hyrox competitions of late, right?
Yes, I am going into my fourth season with
Wow.
Hyrox, so I'm 14 races deep now.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's a
I
lot.
love everyone. Yeah, I love every race a little bit more, mainly because what it teaches me each time. Every training block teaches something new. Every race, I'm learning something about myself and my technique and how to improve. And it's just been a really valuable race to be part of.
It's an interesting race. And as you know, I've had a chance to play with it a little bit. I'm
Mhm.
coaching some athletes that are competing in Hyrox. And I'm driven by curiosity. I'm curious to know how the body responds relative to the level of intensity, the duration that's involved in the sport, and principally the most important component of the race, as is the case with most of the things I've done, is the run. And people
Mhm.
that are watching this, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume a lot of them are watching my podcast or my posts because they saw once upon a time this 3 minute running tutorial that I don't know if I want to use the term viral. Can I say that? It's
Mhm.
like if you get like a
Sure.
over if you get over 1 million views, would that be viral?
I'm going to classify that as viral.
All
Yes.
right. Well, anyway, whether I like it or not, people keep dragging me back to that 3 minute video, and it's funny because I mean globally, I've got people from all over the world that have reached out to me at one time or another. I get like an email almost every day from somebody that watched that video and had that aha moment where all of a sudden it started to make sense, things clicked, and they were able to get out of their own way. They maybe chronic injuries,
Mhm.
performance just wasn't what it used to be. I think that's how I met you. I think, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but going back to my curiosity, I've come from the sport of triathlon back in the day, and really not knowing much about science of the sport, other than it's a long race, Ironman, and it requires three different disciplines back to back. Energy demands are huge. Aerobic potential is massive. It's very, very critical in that sport. And going into other sports, and most recently the High Rocks competitions, I started to notice that the same problems exist. It's like if you don't run well, you're going to have a hard time ending up on a podium. and your energy costs are dependent on the efficiency that you carry through the run and through the other exercises. So if you have a, I don't want to say a terrible run. Let's just say that if you're running inefficiently and your heart rate starts to spiral out of control, and it's like a
Mhm.
domino effect. After the first round in the run, you set yourself up for an exercise that you spend a little bit too much energy going into the next exercise. You come out of that exercise spending a little bit more energy than you hoped for. You go into the run, you don't have the energy you hoped you had, and it just like becomes that push and shove all through until you finally get to the wall balls, and you get to this place where you say, "I hate wall balls." That's the hard part. And it's not, in my opinion, it's not the wall balls. It's everything you did before you had to be challenged by the wall balls that was a problem. And so I look at the energetic costs, and I look at the energy systems associated with participating in such a sport relative to what might be the demands in an endurance sport like a marathon or a triathlon. And they're polar opposites. How your body
Mhm.
is going to access fuel sources, what it's going to rely on, how your body needs to be developed to contend with either of those factions. And it's not a one size fits all type of scenario. You can't like say, well, I'm going to take my triathlon training and throw it on top of my Hyrox and hope it works, because it won't.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, it won't. But the thing that we wanted to talk about, and I started out discussing this early on, or warning people of this early on, is so you have the effort and you have the efficiency or inefficiency. And this is kind of the struggle that occurs in every sport, in pretty much anything, right? And so
Mhm.
let's just say that you really work on your efficiencies. You're really making sure that you're trying to do everything correctly. And then you start adding effort. Then you start putting more and more effort into it. Or the polar opposite. You put the effort into it and it's not working. So you start focusing back on the efficiencies. And then, so there becomes that struggle between the two.
Mhm.
And you know me, this has been my life for a very, very long time. And with my clients, I struggle with this too, trying to figure out what the approach might be to maximize efficiency and minimize the amount of effort necessary to achieve the end game, right? And it caused me to start to think about the things that nobody talks about. And I shamelessly beat this thing to death because I really think it's not talked about enough, is the concept of flow, the thing that gets in the middle of your performance. And so you've been playing with my stuff for a little bit.
Mhm.
What are you taking away from this? What are you starting to see or maybe don't agree with in all of that?
Yeah, so I think just to kind of give some context, when you and I started working together on running mechanics, it started out as awareness. I needed to be aware of what wasn't working well and why. And then I also needed to be able to identify it independently, right? Because as wonderful it is to have a coach next to you all day, every day, telling you what you are and aren't doing right, it's just not always possible as an athlete. And so I know from my standpoint, being able to work with you one on one and then take those cues and acknowledge them and then see it when I record myself, I'm like, okay, I mentally and physically start to tune in to what my body is doing versus what it needs to be doing to be efficient. And then I take that and I translate it and move it into the heart rate flow training and understanding what does my capacity feel like when I'm hitting 75, 80, 85% of my heart rate max, whether it's in training, whether it's on competition. And then I have to be able to piece that together with my mechanics. And I think for me, over the years, just using all of these concepts, so understanding metabolic efficiency, understanding gait mechanics, and understanding my body's weaknesses, as far as compensatory movements, has really helped me tap into that state where when I find myself in a training run or I find myself in a race, I'm aware that my shoulders get tense. I'm aware that my gait is changing. And then that's just a cue for me to say, okay, I got to get back to the foundations, which are move and breathe. Because if I'm breathing, I'm going to be able to move. And if I'm moving, I'm going to be able to alter those mechanics. And then everything just becomes systematic and moves in this flow and this motion where it's not where I'm fighting mechanics. I'm not fighting my mind, which is trying to limit me. I'm tapping into the potential of the body when I focus on what it can do. And
Yeah.
so I think those have been some of the big integrating pieces for me personally, and then I see that in other athletes as well. I see that in individuals that I coach. When they finally find this place where, they know they're at an uncomfortable heart rate because they've practiced that and they've trained it, but they also know what they need to do to continue going. And it's tapping into that moving, the breathing, the focus on stride versus trying to think about everything at once.
Yeah. So you touched on a few things that I think um, bears a little bit of highlight perception. And,
Hmm.
as a coach and a clinician working in my lab and doing gait analysis on people for so many years now, what I used to do is I used to try to explain to people what they're doing wrong while they're running on the treadmill next to me. Something like, you know, I might have to say, my cue might be run on your toes. Now, clearly, I don't want them to run on my toes, but I'm trying to negotiate with them to get them off their heel. And if they're
Hmm.
thinking of being further forward, that the end product would be that they're landing where I wanted them to land. And I'm
Right.
careful to let them know that I don't really mean for them to be on their toes. And so, but their perception of what they're doing when they shifted away what is normal for them to something that is so foreign to them is their perception is that they are way up on their toes. And so I
Hmm.
used to wrestle with things like that a lot, trying to get people to buy in. And so if I'm explaining to someone that I need them to make this shift, they may not be absorbing it. They might be thinking they got resistance up here and they're not willing to, like, for example, on a treadmill, because it's rate independent,
Hmm.
some of the eccentric energy that you would normally gather when you're running across ground is stolen from you. And so I will ask them to alter their gait a little bit so that they don't start overstriding. I might tell them to pick their knee up a little bit. And so if they pick
Hmm.
their knee up, it helps them to keep their tibia more on a vertical plane, and their contact point's going to be closer to center mass when they land. But it feels like they're going to chip a tooth. I've had people actually tell me that they felt like they were picking their knee up so high that they're going to hit their chin and chip a tooth. And so
Yeah.
we'd go through, and then so that get resistance. They'd like, yeah, I don't think so. That doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't feel right, right? And so what I ended up doing, and I did it with you, and I think that's part of what you were talking about, is I put the camera on the side and the monitor in front of you, so you could
Hmm.
see in real time what's actually occurring. So you could see, well, I'm not actually on my toes. I am landing closer to my center mass. That does look a lot better than what I was doing a moment ago. And so now they're starting to alter their perception in a favorable path. They're starting to realize what it feels like when they're doing something correctly relative to what their perception was before. And so this goes back to the concept of flow, because once you understand what it feels like when you're doing it right, it's easier to bring this forward. It's easier to put it into play. And then so
Hmm.
you touched on something that I find fascinating, and I'll be very frank with you. I never gave anybody any tutelage regarding breath rate until recently. And people
Hmm.
used to tell me, "Hey, I've been reading that you should only breathe through your nose. You should only breathe through your mouth. Should And then they got the thing to open the bridge of the nose up." And they're all trying to fight for some method of getting more air in their system. So getting into a rhythm with your breath rate is something you have to teach, just like you have to alter your cadence and your frequency. You have to teach yourself to be more comfortable with the breath rate. And then when you start to get into that rhythm, when you start to realize that I have a better control of my effort because I now have a better control of my breath rate. And you've probably done this. I've done this with many, many people. While they're running, I'm with them. And I'd say, by the way, you know how it works. I call it trust but verify. So I'm on my bike next to them. I'm collecting data. I've got, my little computer set up where I've got their chest strap. I'm monitoring their heart rate. I have a speaker on my bike that is audibly kicking out the metronome. So I have them on the frequency that I want them to be on. I'm actually reading that their frequency is correct. I'm looking at their heart rate. I'm looking at their pace, and I'm controlling their effort. And then I'm also asking them to give me a perceived exertion. On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you now? I'm looking at their heart. By the way, and this is shortly after having tested them. VO2 max test kicks back, says threshold's 150. Okay, let's see what 150 looks like in a real world. And so what are you now perceptively at 150 beats? They don't even know what their heart rate is. What are you right now? I'm a 4. I'm an 8, whatever it might be. And then I'm making decisions on whether I should push them or not push them. And then when they start to suffer, I'm looking at the data. I'll say, take 4 deep breaths. Exhale slowly, inhale carefully, 4 times. By the time they take their 4th breath, their heart rate has dropped 6 beats. They haven't slowed down. They haven't altered their force production or their pace. They just altered respiration rate, and all of a sudden they got control. So this is a trigger. And so when you start to identify things are starting to get a little wonky, you start going to work. Like you said, there's like a checklist. I'm looking at tension. I'm trying to pay attention to all these things that I know are the culprits behind lackluster performance, and I'm going to be conscious of them rather than thinking in terms of, I'm just going to push myself harder this time. That never seems to bear fruit, in my opinion, right? So
Right.
I know I'm getting long-winded here, but I'm going to go back to the first time I wrote anything about flow. And I wrote some training programs where with icons, I indicated, I think you probably have some of these, indicated what their heart rate or their effort should look like relative to where they are on that infinity symbol. And I remember the first time somebody that was so proud they were following it, and we were in a conversation like this, and she was wearing this thing like a quarterback has, like, it's like the playlist is on her arm.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, I'm doing it exactly the way you told me. She goes, look, I got this thing, I made it, so that 5 minutes in I know I got to go here now, and 10 minutes in I got to go there now. I said, you fucked it up. And she had this look on her face because she was so proud of herself. I felt bad. I felt really bad because I just basically crushed her soul. I said, you're missing the point. The concept of flow is to pay attention to where your body is relative to the effort and what you should do about where you are in that time and space. So a script might indicate, after 5 minutes, do this now. Well, in 5 minutes, your body might not want to do that. Your body might want to do it in 8 minutes, but it doesn't want to do it in 5. Or it may very well be your body doesn't want to do that at all today. And so when you start paying attention to that perception, preemptively, you're looking at preemptively what you should or should not be doing based on the way your body's responding to work. And so this is where you get away from the dialogue that is prescribed for you, where like some greater mind than yours, your coach, tells you that on Tuesday, this is what you're doing. Well, you wake up in the morning on Tuesday and your body says, this is not what I want to do today. I may want to do it tomorrow, but I feel like I should not do this today. So let's just say you force yourself to do it anyway because your coach told you to do it, right? Come Wednesday, you're ruined. So whatever you had planned for your Wednesday, it ain't going to work because you let them push you into this hole on Tuesday. And so, kind of releasing yourself from all uh, those dictated obligations, and just start to listen to the way your body's responding to work, you start getting better. I'm going to shut up after
Mhm.
this. One more thing I want to tell you.
You're good.
A dear friend of mine, I probably told you about this guy before, a dear friend of mine and somebody I mentored for many years, had the highest VO2 score of anybody I've ever met, ever tested. He blew an 85 VO2 score. And now that is really high for just a runner. Now, you might find that in cross-country skiers. You might find that in cyclists. You don't see that. I mean, it's a rarity to see it in cycling. Your top 4
Mhm.
percentile of professional cyclists might push an 85. But rarely do you see just a pure runner show that kind of a VO2 score. At least in my world, I've never seen anybody blow a higher score than that. He ran a 2:46 marathon. He could run a 2:46 marathon any day of the week. You could be drinking coffee with him, say, "Would you please go run a marathon?" And he would run a 2:46. He could not run a 2:35. There was just not in him to run a 2:35. And I met him and I started working with him. I said, "You're running a 2:46 and you have a VO2 score of 85. That just does not make any sense to me. Something is sorely wrong with what you're doing." And of course, he didn't know me that well at that point in time. As a matter of fact, there's an article in Outside Magazine about the conversation they had with him about me, where he said he thought, "Who's this old man? He's just so full of shit," right? And I started working on his mechanics, and I started helping him to change the way he moved, and he started training that way. He ran a 2:23 at Boston. Okay. Then now he's paying attention to me and he's listening to whatever I tell him. I gave him my flow marathon training plan leading into Boston. And now, mind you, he was now at this point in time 39 years old. I think maybe even 40 years old. And so he started doing the flow training plan that I offered him, basically telling him, you push when your body says push, you relent when your body needs to relent, and your focus is to cover these bases over the course of this length of time. This is the duration I'd like you to apply. This is the dominance of the energy system that I want you to apply, but I'm giving you latitude to make those changes and shifts in energy costs whenever you feel necessary. He was running, he should have run Boston after that conclusion of that training block. 217 is what I predicted at 39 years old. So he would have went from a 246 to 223 to a 217.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he didn't. It was the worst year at Boston that he'd ever run. The weather was off. Everything was just off, and it had nothing to do with him. But I kept it. I actually have the Strava of his 20-mile time trial. At mile, let me see if I get this right. At mile 17, he was at about 138 beats per minute, and he was running a 5:05 mile pace
Yeah.
at 138 beats per minute.
It's pretty incredible.
He actually his heart rate was going down and his paces was going up over the course of those 20-mile segments. And I did the math based on that because that was his last time trial prior to running Boston. And I said, I don't even want it to come out of my mouth because it doesn't sound like it makes any sense. But I think based on what I'm looking at, you should run a 217. He goes, "You know what, the way I feel right now?" He goes, "I'll probably go faster than that." Because he said, "I've never felt this fit." He was running 68 miles on average per week. Prior to
Mhm.
that, he was running 110 miles per week. His volume cut down, his efficiency went up, and that was how it all rolled out. But where I'm going with this, and I'm being a little belabored with it, but I'm going to back off, I promised, is that the concept of flow is that middle ground. It's between effort and efficiency. It's the thing that you're doing to manifest more efficiencies without having to throttle up more effort. Now, please tell me, am I crazy?
I don't think so. I think you bring up many really good points relative to just how everything has to work in synergy for you to get to that point. And I think a lot of times, I've been guilty of it in the past as well. I thought more volume, work harder, I'm going to advance to the next best thing. Well, that's not the case for every athlete, and doesn't need to be. Um, I think sometimes we look at the elites and the training volume that they have, and we don't realize that biomechanically they are more sound than general population going into a race and training. And so sometimes they can get away with that, but then when you're also looking at this flow state, it's about, like you said, being able to control the systems and being able to control our nervous system through breath work. If you can get those breaths in, calm the nervous system down when it's in this fight or flight and panic mode because the heart rate is climbing, all you have to do is bring the heart rate down. Sounds simple, it is complex, right? And so, like you said, focusing on that breath work to watch them hold pace, but the exertion or that perception of the body, it's like the body is like, okay, I'm not in this fight, I'm in this state of flow because I have what I need. And then that goes into the efficiency of mechanics as well. So if I'm getting the breath work down and I'm checking in with myself, and now, it sounds like if you have any athlete that can focus on the mechanics, be efficient in the mechanics, then that's going to translate into a bigger piece of the puzzle as well. So I think when we look at flow from a state of perception, it's, and again, this is just my interpretation of it from how I use flow as well, is I'm tuning into the alarm system that's going off on my body, and I'm saying, okay, what is the alarm system telling me? Is it telling me that my heart rate's jacked and I need to bring it down? Yes. Then to do that, I control breath work. Because if I can control breath work, I can get back to focusing on the mechanics. And when I can get into the mechanics, it's all about moving and breathing. And so I think it just comes back to, like you said, with athletes, you raise the awareness, you develop the skill to tune into the awareness or the alarms that are going off, and then you allow the nervous system to get that better information. And once you get that better information, you can take that information and pivot it on the spot and settle in. And when you settle in, that's your flow,
Right. So
right? Because you're no longer in that panic.
I often fall back on this because it's something that I'm familiar with. And I don't know, a lot of people that know me don't maybe don't even know this. Is my brother is like a seventh degree black belt. He's younger than me. He's like 6 years younger than me. And I remember when I was going off to war, um, I my little brother, I wanted to make sure he was cool, so I waltzed him into this martial arts place that I'm familiar with, introduced him to the instructor there, and paid for, I don't know, so many months of his training. And he was at that point in time, I think he was in junior high school, and he never looked back. He stayed in it for, I mean, now he's 66 years old or something like that. He's been training,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, a student of the art clearly for all these many years, right? And here's where I'm going with this. He did a seminar, or a demonstration, I should say, that I was involved in. So he had me stand on a chair holding, I don't know, it's like 4 inches of boards, wood, over my head, in front of my head. And he took a 6-pack of Heineken bottles and broke them up onto a little towel, barefoot, stood in the broken glass, jumped up in the air, kicked the wood, broke the wood, landed in the broken glass, completely unscathed, not a cut, nothing. Now, I'm Big Brother, and my first conversation was, how in the hell did you do that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, now it's sort of like wearing me out. I said, how do you train for that? And he said, you don't. It's not like something you train for. It's a consciousness of where he needs to
Mm-hmm.
be in time and space in order for things to go correctly. He landed on those shards of glass, and I don't know how he did. It's just a consciousness of needing to land correctly so that he wouldn't cut
Mm-hmm.
himself. Now, to me, these type of episodes that are almost inexplicable, you almost can't explain how that could even be, takes you back to this place between effort and efficiencies where there's this thing in the middle that's not necessarily promoting an outcome, but allowing an outcome. And you're
Mm-hmm.
right. I absolutely agree with you 100%. The education, the knowledge of what it is that you need to focus on in order to get into your better place is critical. If you have no idea what to do when you get into trouble, you're really in trouble, right? So when you're moving
Absolutely.
along and you're starting to think, okay, this is what's going wrong, this is what I need to do about it, and you start to get into this organizational capacity. So you start gathering yourself. And it could be a function of simple as just a running gait issue. Like, I'm starting to lose it. I'm starting to reach, whatever. I need to get my hips forward so I'm not having all that stress on my hip flexors. Whatever it is, you start to make this mental shift that takes you out of danger. And I think that, and I talk about this in my book, this ongoing conversation between the central nervous system, the central governor, and your effort, where the central governor is basically, okay, I'm going to make decisions as to whether we ought to let this guy go or stop this guy from doing what he's doing. And the central nervous system is the supreme leader over this, saying, well, okay, we'll let you play the game for a little while, but I'm going to hold absolute authority over this outcome. And if you don't get this organized, I'm going to shut it down, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of people aren't aware that there's this mechanism that's going off that's dictating the ability to produce work or reduce work. And it isn't just about effort. You could beat your head against the wall all you want to and not end up in a better place. And that's what I look at. So, reflecting on what you mentioned earlier, more volume is not necessarily the answer. More intensity relative to the volume is not necessarily the answer. It's a combination of consciousness of the effort and respecting what your body is allowing you or disallowing you to do along the path. And so how do you? And by the way, when I wrote this book, I was having a hard time trying to indicate the triggers that people need to follow in order to find this happy place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you read it. By the way, you're one of few people that actually read this book so far. I mean, there was my wife who
Yeah.
it was the final edit. I
Mm-hmm.
sent a copy to Coach Parker, and he read some of it. I don't know how much of he read. And you and me. That's it. And by the way, this is what it's going to look like when it's in somebody's hand for real. So
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to touch on, when you talk about um, the space where you have that efficient effort and you capitalize on that in training, I think that's something that gets missed a lot too. I think that's one of the gaps that I think should be talked about a little bit more, in understanding that you can have a beautifully mapped out training plan, but if you're going into workout after workout, depleted, exhausted, and not acknowledging those body cues, you're not on the fast track to grit and grinding through. You're usually on a fast track to injury, poor recovery, all of the negative compounding factors that are I mean, the compounding factors that are negatively impact performance, right? And so I think that's a really big important part of flow too, is understanding just because your program says today is a, tempo work and you woke up after a late shift and zero energy, but you're going to try and grind through. You don't really afford your body that efficiency, and you don't afford yourself the opportunity to capitalize on that training bout. Whereas, like you said, one of those missing links could also be, hey, just having that awareness that, ooh, this load's going to be too much for me today. I'm going to pivot. And then I capitalize on that heading into the next training bout. So you have that longevity in sport, you have that longevity in training. And I mean, you don't have to run 120 miles a week to hit, you know, a a sub 2.5 hour marathon.
So
You know what I mean?
I was thinking about this while you were talking about this. A coach, that should be their premium responsibility. So I know you work with a lot of athletes, and I do as well. Is I think that the hardest thing for me to do and get buy-in from is reining people back,
Hmm.
because people get anxiety when they feel like they're not working enough. And they don't want to accept the fact that recovery is actually work. Recovery is actually a serious component of your process. And so if you
Hmm.
work all the time, well, it's called supercompensation. So basically what it is like if you work, you dig a hole, and it's further in the hole that you get and harder it is to dig out of it. And so the trick is to find this equilibrium, this balance between effort and recovery, and do it in such a way that you have progression in your outcomes rather than regression in your outcomes. And this goes back to
Hmm.
nutrition as well, because it isn't just about the energy you expend, it's the energy you consume. And obviously, if you're not feeding
Hmm.
enough energy, you're not going to be able to put in the work. And by the way, I put a lot of energy, you probably are aware of this, I put a lot of time into the energetics piece in that book, because I don't think
Hmm.
enough people understand the validity of making sure that their feeding strategies are on point, and the responsibility of the different substrates. What does fat do for you versus carbohydrate versus, protein? And we're prey to the marketing gurus out there that, I tell people, if you go into a grocery store, you can't sell the concept of carbohydrate as a supplement, right?
Hmm.
Every aisle you go down has carbohydrates in it, but there's only one little area where they keep the protein, right? And so
Hmm.
you really, but oh yeah, I got to get my protein in. I got to get my protein. Everybody's punching protein in like it's the panacea to performance, and they're misguided. And so their energetics go off, their metabolism gets jacked up, and then
Hmm.
they get, when your body starts using protein as a fuel source. Help me.
So ketogenic, you go into ketosis and or are you talking about rhabdo?
They're basically the same outcomes. It's like
Yeah.
when your body is not getting the carbohydrate it requires. It's gluconeogenesis is what I was looking for. So you get into this gluconeogenesis where your body says, "Oops, we don't have enough carbohydrate to support this work. Look at that protein sitting over there doing nothing. Let's go ahead and munch that up and process that." Hard road to get a little bit of glucose back in your system, back into your glycogen stores, and next thing your performance starts to wane, and you can't put your finger on why things are going badly, right? So what do? You start working harder, right? When your performance starts to
Hmm.
falter, you think, well, I'm not doing enough work. And where in fact, the problem wasn't whether you're doing enough work or not, you just weren't being fed well enough. And you weren't aware of it because you get accustomed to it. You're used to not eating enough. And that becomes your new normal. Or you bought into this concept of you're going to be fat adapted one day, where you don't really need carbohydrate. There's no, you don't need carbohydrate. Don't worry, your fat will take care of it for you. And there's just so much confusion out there. So I look at that too. That's part of the Rubik's Cube is
Hmm.
the efficiency is not just about the mechanics and effort. It also has to do with the energetics. How are you being efficient with the way you're feeding the system? And so we can go all day like this talking about this kind of thing. And I'm sure that you're smiling because you're yeah, you're right. It's one of those things where I don't think enough people get enough of the information they need in order to make sound decisions regarding the way they approach their training.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And then I also think and I'll speak anecdotally, I think until you're ingrained in the sport or you're ingrained in running or Hyrox or triathlon, whatever you're training for, learning your body comes from that energetic piece too. I might think that I only need X amount of carbohydrates for this run, and the worst case scenario, I'm going to carry extra now. I'm just going to say that for me personally because I can always have too much fuel, but the minute I start to run on empty, I'm tanked. And I'm not just tanked for that day, I'm for the day after because I'm hindering my recovery. And then I'm tanked for the day after that. It's not like I can just make it up. And I think the same goes for sleep, right? All of these variables that are going to impact performance. But I think when we tie in understanding, again, we're building that foundation as an athlete. You want to understand what are the energy systems that are at play? How is my physiology tied to that? So I know that if I'm cranking my heart rate and I'm pushing high intensity, I need to be pumping carb too, because that's the only way my body's helping me. And so that ties into the energetics, right? If I have enough energy coming in, then at least my brain's going to be able to fire, control my breath work, and recognize, hey, my pattern or my gait's getting off. Now I need to dial into that. And so it creates this whole feedback loop that helps us stay in a flow state, not only from finding a rhythm from an efficiency standpoint, but understanding the pieces that tie into being in a flow state so that we can get to that efficiency. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
absolutely. So
Yeah.
you
So,
touched on something that another thing that's a piece of the puzzle that I think a lot of people are not aware of is it may not be so much that your tank is being emptied, and I'm referring to like a high rocks competition. I mean, clearly you're not going to deplete your energy stores in an hour and 20 minutes. I mean, unless you've been on some kind of a fad diet and you're just not feeding yourself well enough anyway. But if you go
right.
into an event well enough, tapped off or topped off, you've got all the energy you need, you're not going to deplete that energy stores, but you can deplete your blood glucose. So,
Hmm.
and so and a lot of people aren't aware of this. You have about a little more than a teaspoon of blood glucose available to you at any given time. And when that starts to wane, it's not that easy just to repay that. So I've been finding that some of the top athletes that I'm familiar with in the sport of high rocks are using goo or some fashion of carbohydrate gel
Hmm.
only to pump their blood glucose back up because they're not patching the energy leak from their glycogen stores. They're not really going to
Right.
be able to do that. But when your blood sugar starts plummeting, then the wheels fall off the bus too. And I think they're just having an understanding of what really energetics really means when it comes to performance is critical. And so you go you go into a gunfight with a butter knife, right? Is basically what you're doing. Where you're not feeding yourself properly, you're overtrained, your efficiency is way off, and your only solution to all of those problems is to work harder. That is your butter knife. So
Hmm.
anyway, now I want to talk about you a little bit. So I know you told me earlier that you've decided to focus more on dealing with women in performance and in fitness. And so
Hmm.
tell me a little bit about that. And I want to make sure people understand how to find you too. So I'm going to put that up in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my focus for many years has been, I'll say, I'm gonna read, I want to redo that. I'll say my focus has now shifted in the athlete space and general population space to really helping women tap into their potential. And what I mean by that is similar to all of the work with flow, I work with women to really bridge the gap between psychology and physiology. So, really understanding and transforming the body from the inside out. And so, what that looks like is very similar to flow and understanding the body. It's paying attention to how the body actually moves and what the body needs to go to that next level, whether it's in strength, whether it's in cardio, whether it's all of the above. But really understanding those components and paying attention to how the body moves instead of how we think it should move. Um, a lot of women I work with think their body should move one way, and so they're fighting it versus working with how their body actually moves and stepping into that. So I really work on that. And what I see in that realm is that it starts to improve performance, which is incredible, right? Because the more in tune you are with your body, the more you can perform because you understand it. And it's really working on also helping women improve how they show up in life, building that relationship with themselves. And so, whether I'm training someone for a race, whether it's a 5K, a 10K, half marathon, cycling rally, Hyrox, I have many Hyrox athletes. DECA is another sport that I've trained athletes in. So, whether it's that or just helping someone return to fitness, it's really all coming down to the same principles, right? Um, Understanding the science behind it, where they're at in that season of life, helping the athlete. I firmly believe if you have a body and you can move it, there is a level of athleticism in you, and we can tap into that. We just have to be aware. Myself aware as the coach, but then also the client and the athlete aware of who they are, what they're capable of, and then seeing if we can push that envelope a little bit, stepping into that identity and then just really enhancing performance. And that's going to be very individual. So is that performance looking like hitting a PR on a 5K? Is that looking like hitting a personal best Hyrox? It's really dependent on the person. But that's what my coaching really encompasses. And so it's great to be able to learn from other mentors and learn different training philosophies that tie into just my overall coaching philosophy. And so I think, everything we've talked today about flow, that ties into it too. Because as a coach, it's my responsibility to understand where a client's at, be aware of their needs, help coach them through that so that they can continue to perform and better understand the body as a system and not as a machine. So I think a lot of times people come in thinking their body is a machine, just going to reprogram it, work it a little harder, I'm going to get a better outcome. When really it's more so about creating this interconnectedness and understanding for optimizing efficiency.
Were you surprised? And I didn't ask you this yet. Were you surprised that I dedicated a chapter to women?
No, I think it's so important.
Well, I understand,
Yeah,
but so here's
yeah.
my revelation was this. I said, here I am writing all this stuff regarding training, whatever. And it occurred to me that most of everything I've ever read that's performance oriented, it's always about men. It's basically
Yeah.
the world in sport as it's written has nothing to do with women. And I thought to myself, I said, this is really ridiculous. I said, there should be at least a chapter in my book where we talk about the circumstances that women face when they perform. And they
Mhm.
have unique characteristics and physiology that is quite different than what men go through, and having an understanding of the things that they're going through while they're trying to perform. So, not only did I
Mhm.
wrestle with the concept, but I learned a lot about women by writing it. Because obviously I had to do a lot of research.
Yeah.
This is not something I just knew. I had to research it because I didn't know. And I started
Right.
learning some things that were very unique to women, and also finding out some of the advantages women bring to the table when they're performing. Women tend to have much
Mhm.
better endurance than men do. They
Yes.
have the staying power. Actually, the further the distance goes in a run, the more likely the woman's going to show up. And so I felt like it's something I felt a responsibility to produce, and I did.
Mhm.
So all said and done, good stuff. So I'm going to put a link in the bottom of the description here on how people find you. And I've already posted your little thing, but I'm going to put it back up here one more time since I'm talking about it. You have to forgive me because I'm nearly blind. I'm an old man. There it is. There's your little logo. It's the
Yeah.
Daily Grind Fitness.
Daily grind fitness. Yeah.
And cool. So, obviously enough. Do you know that this almost killed me because this chair, actually, this is the second chair. I burned up the first chair because
Sitting there doing all the
I've
writing.
been glued to this office for literally a year. Honestly, and I tell people this, and I probably shouldn't, but it goes in here, comes out here. I put between 6 and 8 hours a day, 7 days a
Mhm.
week into producing that work. And everything from cover to cover was created by me. The images, the formatting, the cover design, everything that's in there. It's like,
Everything. Yeah.
when Mama makes stew, you know, everybody gets out of the kitchen, right? It's just up to you. And so it was a lot of work, and just I could start noticing. Matter of fact, I got a doctor's appointment tomorrow. He's going to say, "Hey, man, your blood pressure's getting high. You're going to get some exercise." So, but anyway, actually, it's always wonderful to have a chance to chat with you. And
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, and so are you going to Miami to compete?
I am not. I'm taking a page out of my coaching book and your coaching book, and I'm listening to my body right now. I'm taking some time to really heal and change up my training and see what's feeling best for where I'm at season wise right now. So I am pouring into the learning and the revamping and my clients that are competing. That's been really fun for me. And then I'm on my own healing journey. So my goal is to be back on the race course, doing some sort of race heading into the summer. Right now, I'm just picking up a couple of local 5Ks, 10Ks, those kinds of things to keep my head in the game and stay sharp. And then we're coming back next season, primed and ready,
There you go.
optimized, and everything dialed in. Yeah.
Excellent.
Um, so yeah, that's what everything looks like for me right now. And just quickly about your book, it's been an honor to be able to read it.
Thank
Number
you.
one, all of your books. Number two, it's been an honor to learn the principles and how you came about them, and just understanding your story more. And so, if anyone's on the fence about who you are, which probably not, if they're watching, they know you pretty well by now. But I think that this book, Run, really is just such a tribute to legacy and everything that you teach and everything that you've done. And so um, it's a really great read for anyone who's looking to gain more knowledge, even about themselves, right? So I wanted to say that
I
about the
appreciate
book,
that.
and just yeah, what a privilege it's been to stay in touch and keep working together and collaborating and talking through things. So
You
thank you
know,
for that.
it was hard. That's all I can tell you. It was hard. So
Yeah.
I think that now that I'm getting on in age, um, you reflect on so many things. I mean, it's been a journey. I mean, I talked about some things about me that a lot of people don't know in the very beginning. I had a
Hmm.
little rough ride for a while and came out of it, and now it's You're talking about 5K, 10K, doing a race, whatever. That's so off my radar. My goal is when I wake up in the
Hmm.
morning that I actually wake up in the morning. And then when I put both feet on the ground and stand up and, make my way to the coffee machine, that's a good morning. It's,
Hmm.
it's working out.
It's all relative, right? Yeah, it's all relative, and
I figure,
I think that's an important part of it too.
yeah, I give myself a hall pass. I figure 73 years old, I just think it's okay. I did go for a nice bike ride yesterday and the day before that and whatever. When the weather agrees with me, I get out and do something, but it just ain't like it used to
There
be.
you
That's
go.
all I can tell you. Anyway, thank you so much, Ashley. Um,
You're welcome. Thank you.